Our personal development is not a single long-distance runner that starts at one point and then gets to the finish line. We are an entire football team, and we are all over the field at different times, and some of us are just sitting on the bench. And whoever has the ball at the particular moment, including the kid on the bench whose father owns the team, and every so often he just takes it and puts it under his bench and he won't give it to you. You know, all of these citizens are all happening at the same time. So one of the things that's very difficult on the spiritual path is really hard to tell sort of what's forward and what's backward, because it also depends on what you yourself are trying to learn. A person who's very aggressive, who's always ready to speak up and defend their position, learns to just be a little calmer and not try to impose their will on the world all the time. Someone who's always very docile and just does what everybody else wants them to do, needs every so often to pick up a heavy object and hurl it at someone else, you know, with a loud, perhaps swear word at the time, because that's forward for them. It's because we're not trying to get from here to here. People think of the spiritual path as linear, that we all start together and we all just go like this, and you can see who's behind, and you can see who's ahead, and you can see where you are in relation to them. Forget it. It's more like the flight of a bumblebee, you know, where we actually know where we're going, but you can't tell from looking. Another better way to say it is think of a wheel, or think of a circle like this. And we're all arrayed around the rim of that circle, and we're all trying to get to the center. And the center is equidistant from every spot on the rim, but depending on where you are, if you're on the east side, you're trying to get to the center, you head due west. If you're on the west side trying to get to the center, you head due east. And if you happen to go a little past the center and run into them, look at our world today, you start fighting with each other about whether west is the right direction or east is the right direction, because nobody knows what they're talking about. We're all just trying to get to the center. But there are, and this is what I was saying when I started, there are objective realities to this. And in a very peculiar way, and this is just an interesting side fact to this, the caste system in India, which because we have just gone through such a dark time in which the physical form of things was so strong, the caste system gradually became an instrument of oppression and hereditary, either disenfranchisement or privilege. But it actually came from a higher age for us to help understand which way is forward for each of us. So I'm going to translate that into simple English words because it's easier to understand. Here are the basic 4 stages. Morally asleep, which is one never thinks in terms of values at all, and I'll give some more characteristics of that in a moment. Self-serving, which is where you begin to put out a little energy, and you begin to think at least in terms of my own welfare. Truth-seeking, and then God-knowing. Okay? And think about it, in certain areas of our life, we're more advanced than in others. The morally asleep in the traditional caste system is somebody who's just physical. Shudra is the word. Peasant is the basic idea. You just work with your physical body, completely physically oriented. No sense of higher values at all. Entirely, the only motivation, the only thing that gets you moving is fear of punishment, you know? And this is very helpful if you have employees or children, because you have to motivate people according to what will motivate them. And if you're dealing with a person who's essentially morally asleep and you try to appeal to their higher nature, that doesn't motivate them. If you threaten to punish them, then you'll get them to move. The way the morally asleep person deals with pain is by dulling their consciousness. And this is where I say we're all just sort of like the flight of the bumblebee here and there on these things. If I feel badly, I drink, I take drugs, I go to sleep, I eat the gallon of ice cream, I turn on the television, I run through my phone. It's just like I am not going to solve this problem by changing my consciousness. I'm just going to go underneath it until it goes away. The relationships of a person of that category are parasitic. You don't think about giving, you just think about, you just take care of me. And some mornings were more on that side of things. I myself, I don't have it so much now, but I used to procrastinate a lot. And the only thing that would motivate me was fear of punishment. The work I was doing might be refined, but my motivation was fear of punishment. If I don't get this work done, it's going to be worse. Because in that area, that's where I would be. After we go through that long enough, and we just we become exhausted by it, and we are a river flowing toward the sea. So, it's just the river is going to get to the sea, and this is part of that which is we are divine by nature, and we are being called by God back home again. And eventually, after a number of incarnations, and because we suffer enough and it stops making us happy, we try something else. And so then we get to the level where, if I put out a little bit of energy, if I work a little bit, I get more. If I put out a little more work, I work an extra shift, I get more money, I get a bigger television screen and more cocaine. But whatever it might be, I get something for myself. So then we rise to the level of being self-serving, which is progress from being too lazy even to do things for ourselves. So you see, it's not a question of some absolute scale. It's just in relation to our own self. The motivation for that level, the self-serving level, is what's in it for me. And if there's something in it for me, I'm really happy to do it. And if there's nothing in it for me, why on earth would I do it? So motivation is like this. And the way we try to deal with suffering is we try to control the world around us. We just try to make everything stay the way it's supposed to stay. And the relationships, the classic is the merchant, which is, I'll certainly give you good value, but you have to give me good value back. There's nothing generous. You don't have the money, go away, I'm not going to help you. Doesn't matter if you need it, I don't want it. But you're moving, because now your motivation is, if there's something for me, I'll do it. And relationships then are a trade-off. It's a deal. We'll negotiate. I'll do the garbage, you do the laundry. You didn't do the laundry, I'm not going to take out the garbage. Just like that. But after a while, what accidentally happens when you start working for yourself is every so often you're generous. You give something away. And then you begin to discover that really there's more happiness in sharing than there is just in hoarding. And then we become up to the truth seeker. And most of us live primarily at that level, but there are parts of us, areas of our life where we go back. But you motivate yourself. If there's something in it for me, I'll do it. If that gets you motivated, it's better than just sitting down and watching television instead of doing what you were supposed to do. The truth seeker has begun to wake up to the fact that there are principles involved. And the truth seeker begins to ask not, how will it serve me? But the truth seeker begins to ask, what is right? What is the right thing to do here? And what is morally correct, spiritually, reality correct, is what begins to motivate us. And the ideal of the truth seeker is the kshatriya. Kshatriya is the soldier ruler, the king and the soldier. Because the soldier epitomizes the willingness to sacrifice everything for the good of others. You see, the soldier suffers and trains and works and goes into difficult circumstances and even lays down his life. And he lays down his life for a principle. And so many of you, I certainly speak for myself, kshatriya, if you were going to say it, that's really who I am. Everything that I've done, joyously. That was my incredible difficulty before I met Swami Kriyananda, is that I had nothing that I believed in enough that I could give my life to it. I just, the idea, and where I was, because I had a good upbringing and I was, relatively speaking, privileged, and I was good at school and all those things, all the options were open to me. And I know from past lives I've taken gazillions of them. But I remember just before I was 20, just thinking, so I become a doctor, so I become a lawyer, so I become a business person, this or that. I was interested in theater, so I become an actress. I could just somehow, what would I have at the end? I would have been a doctor, I would have been a lawyer, I would have been an actress. I just like, it, for me, just for me to have it, I couldn't imagine it. But I didn't have anything to give either. You see how complicated it gets? But when the devotee is ready, the answer comes. If you're really asking to attune yourself to what's trying to unfold, that will come to you. And the relationship, of course, the principle of relationship for a Kshatriya person is, how can I serve you? How can I give? And it's not that one is imbalanced, but the principle. But just to put that in, because it's important to say, because people get confused. The principle is not to sacrifice yourself inappropriately for someone else. That is not principle. And the way to think about it is, I'm not more important than you, but I am not less important than you either. We are all equal in the eyes of God. That's the principle that we're following. And so we live by the truth as we understand it. And then what happens as we begin to live more and more by principle is we begin to feel that there is actually a higher power at work here. We begin to discover it because we have attuned ourselves to a more subtle level. If you're just at the morally asleep or even just thinking about yourself, if you think about God at all, you think about praying to him, putting a lot of money into the church dish or whatever it is, or in India you go to the temple and you get them to do 1,000 of whatever mantras you're asking them to do, you're buying favor. You think that God is just like you, he's a merchant, good value. I've done all these prayers for you, and now you're going to give me success in my business or whatever it is that I want. And see, this is how experience tells you. You live like that for a long time, and you try it. One of my friends once said to me when I was subject to a really terrible attitude, God bless her, I was explaining this whole thing about how I was mistreated and, and all these different things that were wrong and weren't going, all these attitudes. And she looked at me so sweetly and said, and how is that working for you? And I was honest enough to say, not very well. Well, she said, maybe you want to consider another way of doing things. And that's how we grow. The most annoying thing about suffering is that it works. It's just so irritating. I was caught in a situation once where I had to face something that was very hard for me. And it took me a little while to figure out what was really going on in the story. I realized I was so mad. I was just really mad at Divine Mother. You can get mad at your mother, it's okay. I was really mad because I knew that I was going to have to face it and do it, and I knew that I would succeed in overcoming the challenge he'd put in front of me. But I knew it was going to be awful, and I was so annoyed. Just, it was crazy, and once I finally got that, I thought, well, let's just buckle down and get through it. There's just no choice. And then, of course, you're on the other side, if you're honest. We always learn, if you really face the challenge that comes to you, on the other side of it, you have to say, and you say this reluctantly, I say it reluctantly, drat. I would never have learned what I now know if I hadn't been forced to go through that experience. So the next bummer that comes down the pike to you, a piece of you remembers. And this is where Mother comes in. This is where Mother comes in. Mother says to you, I'm doing this for your own good. Ha, is what you say in response. Because we're just children. The little child says to Mommy, yesterday was my birthday and we had chocolate cake, and I think chocolate cake is my favorite food. So from now on, Mommy, all I want for breakfast, lunch, and dinner is chocolate cake. Sounds good, doesn't it? This will make me happy and we'll avoid suffering, won't it? And then Mommy says, honey, if you eat nothing but chocolate cake, you won't grow up big and strong. And then the child says, with absolute logic, yes, I will. How does the child know? Child knows nothing. Child is just telling you what I want. Are we that different? What do we know? I know what I want. We think to be loved is for it to be easy and to be pleasurable. But if you pay attention, and that's how you become a kshatriya, you start with if I can just be as dull as possible and put out no energy and just sort of outlast it, everything will be fine. But at the end of the lifetime, you've learned nothing. You just keep going on like that. And finally, really, you just get so bored. You put out a little bit of energy. Oh, then I get for myself. Isn't it great when I always get for myself? And then that, too, just gets a little tiresome. Plus, you discover that no matter how much I get for myself, I'm still all by myself. Nobody really loves me. And then you suffer. And so this doesn't bring you happiness. So you start asking, what's really going on here? And that's what brings us to yoga. That's what brings us to all these things. What is really going on here? And then when we start paying attention, then we become kshatriyas. Beyond the kshatriyas, the Brahmin, which is the priest. But the understanding of the priest is, I'm not even serving principle. I understand. I'm serving the divine. However you call that. Satchidananda is the Sanskrit word. Ever existing, ever conscious, ever new joy. We call it God, we call it Divine Mother, we call it all kinds of things. But it's this infinite power which is our own nature. You begin to realize that's what my life is. I'm an instrument of Satchidananda. So I'm serving God. And the way we don't the question of how do you alleviate suffering, there's no suffering. If you recognize that everything is in the hands of the divine, and it's unfolding the only way it can unfold. There's nothing to resist. Suffering is always, I want it to be different. I just want it to be different. There was a little boy, and we had this ashram house in San Francisco for about a decade. It was this, we always live in the best neighborhoods. We had this huge mansion up in the Pacific Heights area. You put 25 people in a house like that and you can afford it. It had this staircase right up the middle, and there was a lot of wood in the house, so that it echoed. It really echoed. This little boy, a lot of willpower, he was about 4. He woke up one morning at 2 a.m, and he'd basically had it with sleeping. He was awake, and nobody was up, and he was really quite annoyed, so he climbed out of his bed. He stood in the middle of the staircase of the 5-story house. In his big child's voice, he declared, I want it to be morning. And it's just always, I see myself every once in a while like that 4-year-old child, just standing, shouting into the dark, I want it to be different because I think it will make me happier and ease my suffering. But the yogi has to attune themselves to what is really trying to unfold rather than the materialist who says this is how it's supposed to be. But it's stages of growth. Because if you know yourself to be a Vaishya and you're only going to do it if there's something in it for you, then go and be the best possible Vaishya you could be. Serve yourself like crazy until it occurs to you, how is that working for me? Because nobody learns from being told, ever. It's just, you try, but you don't know until you know. A friend of mine, her husband said to her, she was traveling and she put the suitcase on top of the hood of the car. And he said, don't do that because it'll scratch the car. Okay, women don't always listen to their husbands and husbands don't always listen to their wives. I hate to tell you that, but that's actually true. So she went traveling like that, and then she put her suitcase on and pulled it off, and what do you know? It scratched the hood of the car, like that. Like, there it was. It's so obvious, but you wouldn't believe it until you do it. So it doesn't matter what the books say or the scriptures say or even what your guru says until you know it. So don't be afraid to explore. You can't work out someone else's karma. I've taken this, I'm pointing to my blue clothes, the Naya Swami initiation, and there's several stages to here. And someone wanted to take this vow, which is the end of the story. I said, why would you want to take that? It seems completely inappropriate. Well, it's the best vow. It's the top vow. She was a great, accomplishment-oriented, capable person. It was not an appropriate one, but it was the top. And that's how we mistakenly think about our own progress. We just want to go right to the top. It's at least Vaishya, at least it's self-serving. But you have to say, who am I? What do I really know? And this is the last thing I'll say before we stop here. You need to make yourself, authentic is the right word. You need to ask yourself, what do I actually know from my experience to be true? Not what have I read, not what do I hope for, but what do I actually know to be true? And you just keep backing up, so to speak, from some grand idea. What do I actually know? And maybe I know I like to go to yoga class 3 times a week. I like to do particular postures better than others. I feel better if. But what do I actually know? And yes, you need an aspiration. And that mountain is high. It's a really high mountain. And you need to know it's out there. But you don't get there by doing that. You get there by saying, where are my feet? And to get to that mountain, what is right here? And then how can I do this? And if we prefer the dramatic. We prefer the dramatic gesture. There's so much, that's why I say we try to work out someone else's karma, because their karma just looks more entertaining than our own. Generally speaking, I learned that sometimes if people can't be the best, they'll at least try to be the worst. Because the reality is we're mostly just in the mediocre middle. We're just here. One of my friends who was always, when she couldn't be the best, she was always trying to be the worst. I suggested to her that she was perfectly adequate. and she sort of became that. She sort of say to people, I'm perfectly adequate, which sounds like nothing, but it was where she could stand, because she wasn't the worst. But she wasn't the best either. She was just perfectly adequate. My friend had to put on a musical performance with a choir that wasn't very good. I was the speaker, and the choir performance was there. He was a good friend, so I could say that. Thank you. I didn't say it to the whole room. I said it to him later. Thank you for that. That performance was perfectly adequate. Because it was. Reality always wins. And that, as soon as you can just come to peace with that, then you can really start building. Because then you'll be standing somewhere that you can push off from, so to speak. Okay? I didn't leave a lot of time. I could take one question maybe, or 2 if there were any. Yes. Well, let's see. I married at 19. I was married for 5 years because I belonged to Ananda, and he actually belonged to Anandamoyi Ma, just to say that. I met him. We were together after 15 minutes. We were scarcely apart for 5 years. Like, where does that come from? I'd met lots of people in my life. And it was true. It was really there. It really happened. We just instantly knew each other. Swami Kriyananda walked into the room. He walked into the room, he had not spoken. And this is it. This is my pole star. You could give lots of other reasons why that might be true, but I experienced a certainty of relationship, of knowledge of a person that I did not know, except just in that moment. So those are 2 of my experiences. I've had one dream, one enormous, incredible dream, which was really all about a past life, with a person that I absolutely did not get along with at all. We just loathed one another. This is the context of Ananda, welcome to ashram life, And I finally had a dream about all the awful things that she had done to me in my past lives, and they were, one life. It was really awful. It was like, movie quality awful. Somehow she heard about that. I didn't tell her. So she went to a psychic and found out about all the things that I'd done to her, which were exactly equal. There was nothing that she'd done to me that was worse than what I had done to her. So now we really had it, We were really after each other so badly that Swami Kriyananda had to bring us together. And his answer was perfect. First he said, I believe that these past lives are true, which was both, at first we both grabbed that, like, yes! But then he said, but both of you have suffered from what you've done, not just that one life, and you've learned, and the person that you were is not the person that you are now. So, and then once I got that, I began to really not respond from my chakras where all this unresolved fury was, but just actually asking, are you really doing anything that's hurting me? And of course not. She was a perfectly nice person. But I was so unresolved in all those bad things that had happened that I could not see her for who she was. Why was I so blind? I'm a very smart lady. But because, and this was, verified both by Swami and my own dream, because things had happened that we never resolved. We didn't fight them out, but we both went and grew, learned our lessons, and came back together. And now we had the opportunity to forgive ourselves and to forgive each other. You could maybe make another story out of that, but that's the one that really worked for me. And those are just, when I first heard about reincarnation, being a Jewish girl from Texas in 1965, I decided nothing else makes any sense. So I'm going to start using this as a template to see if it will make more sense out of the experiences that I'm having. And it does, and it did. Let's just pretend we're not meeting for the first time. Let's just pretend that it's not really that you're doing an awful thing to me. It's that at one point you did an awful thing to me, or somebody who reminds me of you did an awful thing to me. And then everything begins to roll out with more sense. So that's really, it works, is what I've found.